Deep in the heart of Meadowbrook Forest, where the trees whispered secrets and streams sang gentle songs, all the animals shared one beautiful home. At the very center of this forest stood the great willow, and high in its hollow trunk lived an owl named Ophelia, who had watched over Meadowbrook for 60 whole years. Animals traveled from distant groves and far-off streams all the way to the great willow, just to ask Ophelia what they should do. Where to build a burrow, which herbs might heal a cough, which path through the mountains was safest. Ophelia always seemed to have an answer, and she always spoke with great certainty.
Knowledge is the greatest gift anyone can have, and I have more knowledge than anyone in Meadowbrook Forest.
The forest creatures believed her. After all, Ophelia had read every book in the old human cabin and seemed to know the names of every plant and every family in the forest. Night after night, she studied the humans' books, traced the patterns of the stars, and memorized every leaf and root she could find until her head was full of facts and figures. But down by the quiet pond, at the very edge of Meadowbrook, lived Tobias the tortoise, who spent his days moving slowly, watching the ripples, tasting the breeze, and thinking thoughts he rarely shared.
That tortoise is a fool. He wastes his life sitting in silence when he could be learning and growing as I do.
Maybe Tobias knows things we don't. Maybe his quiet thinking is its own kind of learning.
What could a tortoise possibly know that I don't? He moves at a crawl. By the time he reaches one idea, I've already reached a dozen.
Felix fell quiet, but in his bright fox eyes there was a tiny spark of doubt, a question Ophelia chose not to see. As seasons turned and autumn painted the trees gold and red, the great river flowed wide and strong through Meadowbrook, feeding every pond and stream. But slowly, almost too slowly to see at first, the water began to sink, revealing stones that had once been hidden deep below. Day by day, more rocks appeared, and worried whispers spread from the river to every corner of the forest. Until at last, one cool autumn evening, the creatures of Meadowbrook called for a great meeting beneath the great willow, hoping Ophelia would tell them what to do. Ophelia still believed she would have every answer, but the forest was about to show her that wisdom can arrive in many different shapes and at many different speeds. Bernard the Badger stepped forward, his voice shaking as he warned that if the great river ever dried up completely, they might all have to leave Meadowbrook Forest behind. Gasps and frightened whispers rippled through the crowd, and a small hare called up, "Ophelia, you know everything. Please tell us what to do."
The answer is simple. We will follow the river upstream until we find whatever is blocking it, and then we will clear the blockage so the water can flow again.
Relief washed over the clearing as animals nodded and murmured. Ophelia promised to lead a brave group at dawn to march upstream and fix the problem herself.
And if the blockage cannot be cleared?
Then we will find another way. There is always a solution for those wise enough to see it.
I do not doubt your knowledge, Ophelia. I only wonder if the river is blocked at all. Perhaps the water is flowing as it always has, and it is we who must change how we look for it.
Riddles and nonsense. While you sit and ponder, Tortoise, the rest of us will take real useful action.
At sunrise, Ophelia set out with the strongest animals, following the river upstream for day after tiring day, certain they would find a dam or a landslide they could tear apart. But the farther they walked, the drier the river became, until at last there was nothing but cracked earth and lonely stones where the water had once rushed by.
This makes no sense. There should be something here blocking the flow. There must be.
Maybe the tortoise was right all along, and the river isn't blocked at all. Back home, animals are already whispering that they may have to leave Meadowbrook if the water never returns.
That evening, tired and puzzled by the empty riverbed, Ophelia flew away from the others, telling herself she was only observing as her wings carried her toward the quiet pond. But when she reached the quiet pond, she found Tobias already waiting in the silver moonlight, as if he had known she would come all along.
You have not come to give answers tonight, Ophelia. You have come to ask a question. If you wish only to observe, then observe. Look at the pond and tell me, wise owl, what do you see?
I see a pond, a shrinking one, with muddy banks where the water used to be.
Ophelia stared harder. At the far end of the pond, she finally noticed a narrow channel, carefully carved into the earth, carrying a thin trickle of water away into the dark woods.
Tobias, what is this little ditch? Where is it taking the pond's water?
It is a canal I dug, leading to an underground spring I discovered. While others hurried past the forest floor, I listened to the ground and followed the quiet signs of hidden water.
Year after year, Tobias had crept along the ground, noting where soft moss grew thick, listening for hollow sounds beneath his feet, and learning to read the land the way Ophelia read her books.
If you knew there were underground springs, why did you not say more at the meeting? You could have spared us so much worry.
I tried, friend, but your answers were so loud that my quiet words could not reach you. One spring alone is too small, but I have found many. If your strong voice can gather the others and my slow steps can show the way, together we may save Meadowbrook.
Ophelia's feathers drooped as she finally saw how her certainty had shut her ears. Tobias reminded her that real wisdom is strong enough to bend and learn. There, by the quiet pond, Owl and Tortoise began to plan a new path that might save their forest. The very next morning, Ophelia called another meeting beneath the great willow, but this time she asked Tobias to stand beside her.
Friends of Meadowbrook, I was wrong about the river. There is no great dam to tear apart, but there is another way to find the water we need.
The animals shifted uneasily, surprised to hear Ophelia admit a mistake, their eyes flicking from the proud owl to the quiet tortoise at her side.
Deep beneath our paws and claws, hidden springs are still flowing. If we dig small canals to meet them, we can guide that water back to every pond and pool.
At first, some creatures frowned and whispered that the tortoise was too slow and strange to trust, but Ophelia raised her wings and said she had seen his canal with her own eyes.
Tobias knows the forest floor as well as I know my books. If you have trusted my advice, then trust his map. Together we can build a web of channels before the next rains.
Bernard the badger offered his strong digging claws, Greta the goose promised to carry stones, and clever Felix the fox volunteered to race ahead and mark the safest paths. Soon the clearing buzzed with plans as Ophelia divided the forest into teams, while Tobias unrolled his careful, mud-splattered map of every spring he had found. The work was harder than anyone expected. Walls caved in, water trickled the wrong way, and paws grew sore. But side by side they turned grumbles into giggles and problems into puzzles to solve.
Show me where the earth sounds hollow, Tobias. And this time I will listen before I speak.
And I will share every small thing I notice, for knowledge is like water, Ophelia. It only helps when it moves between us.
Day after day, the channels stretched farther through the forest, thin silver threads beginning to glimmer in the ditches, and hope, like water, slowly returned to Meadowbrook. At last, heavy gray clouds rolled in, and a gentle rain began to fall, joining the animals' hard work and waking the thirsty earth. Water raced along the new channels, spilling into sleepy ponds and empty streams, until Meadowbrook began to sparkle and sing again. Slowly, the great river returned, not as a rushing flood all at once, but as a steady, shining promise that their forest would live and grow. To celebrate, the creatures of Meadowbrook gathered beneath the great willow, laughing, dancing, and cheering for the owl and the tortoise who had helped them find the water below.
All my life, I thought wisdom meant having every answer, Tobias. Now I see it also means knowing what I don't know, and listening when a friend sees something I cannot.
And I believed my quiet thoughts were mine to keep, but I've learned that knowledge is like water, Ophelia. It matters most when it moves and is shared with others.
From that season on, animals came to both Ophelia and Tobias, trusting that book learning and slow, careful watching together made the forest wiser than ever before. And whenever a young creature asked about the secret to true wisdom, they would say, "Find someone who sees the world differently than you do, and really listen. That is where wisdom begins." And that is the story of the owl and the clever tortoise, and how their two kinds of wisdom saved Meadowbrook Forest.